Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Jen's Books. I hope you've had a fabulous weekend. It's really good to speak to you. This is my May roundup part two. So earlier in the month, I talked about 9 books that I'd read and gave reviews. I'll include the links to that with the description of this video. But this is a summary of the final books that I've read in May 2023. Apologies, it's a little bit late, but I am already on my reading for June. On the upside, so many amazing books, so little time. So I managed to read another 5 books throughout the rest of May. Some better than others. I read a collection of short stories. I've read a couple of books that have really kept me turning the pages. One that made me laugh out loud. One that made me scratch my head a bit. But certainly some noteworthy and interesting books with plenty to talk about. But as usual, I don't want to give too much away because if you go away and you want to read these books, I don't want to spoil them for you. But I'll give you a bit of a flavour and what my thoughts are. And it'd be really interesting to know if you've read any of these books, what your views are on them. And it's okay if we disagree, that's fine. You know, that's going to happen. But it's just really interesting to hear other people's takes on them too. So the first book I'm going to talk about is I Am a Fan by Sheena Patel, and that one I actually read on my Kindle, so I will include a little photo here for anybody who's wanting to go and find it. So this was a book that was longlisted for the Women's Prize, didn't make it through to the 6 shortlisted books, but I'd heard loads of really good things about it. And I think it's a really interesting book, which I think it would be really good for book clubs, because I think it would create a lot of discussion. Is it my favourite book that I've read this month? No, I didn't. I can't say I particularly enjoyed it as much as some of the other books I've read. However, I can understand why there's been a lot of interest in it. I think there's some really interesting topics there, and also the way that the story is told by the narrator is really interesting. So the premise is basically we have a first person narrator who's talking about a love affair with the man that she wants, basically is who she calls him all the way through, the man that she wants. So the narrator is already in a relationship with a boyfriend, they live together, and the man that she wants is already married as well, but he seems to have all sorts of different relationships, and they embark on this affair, a very sort of unequal affair, but then he throws her over for another woman, or the woman that I am obsessed with. And our narrator starts to kind of stalk this woman, not kind of, she does. She follows her on social media and she gets to know all about her, and she says she gets to the point where she can't decide whether her reactions and her expressions are her own or ones she's picked up from watching videos of this other woman. So the book is told in a series of very short vignettes, and I really like that actually, because it was really fast paced, and sometimes they're not always in linear in nature, so you go to and fro in time, but generally they seem to be linear, and it asks some really interesting questions about things like gender, about things like race, about fandom, about social media. And this narrator intrigued me, because there's part of me that wanted to shout at her and say, why are you obsessed with this man? Why are you interested in this man? But there's more to it than that. And so because it's told in first person point of view, you know, there is this real sense of intimacy and trust with the narrator. So I enjoyed that as well. I think possibly I just found it a little bit frustrating, you know, because she was so interested in this sort of toxic relationship. But I think the way the story's told makes it an interesting read, and one, as I say, that would be quite good for book clubs, because I think you'd get different points of view coming across in it. So I can understand why it made the long list, but not my favourite from the long list that I've read. The second book that I read is another book that was long listed and didn't make it to the shortlist, and I almost didn't read this. It's The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. Sorry, I'm probably still pronouncing it horribly wrong. And I'd picked this up in the library just before the shortlist was announced, and it didn't make it onto the shortlist, and I almost didn't read it. But then I saw a review for it, and I thought, no, I'm going to give this a read. It sounds fantastic, and you know, it made me laugh out loud. It's one of the few books that I've read recently that genuinely made me chortle. I really, really enjoyed this. Definitely recommend it. Would say it was a 5 out of 5. I didn't read it all in one go, but it didn't suffer from that. It's one that I felt I could put down and pick up. But the premise really is our main character is Geeta, And Geeta is a woman living in rural India, and 5 years ago, her sort of unfaithful and violent husband disappeared, and in their community, she is sort of marked as a pariah. They, in the end, sort of, there's all this rumor mill that she killed her husband, got rid of him, and that's why he's disappeared. So she's making a new life for herself, but she's kind of alienated from everybody around her. But then suddenly the other women in the community start coming to her for help to maybe, you know, remove their husbands. And the crux of the story, I mean, there's a real thriller in there, lots of twists and turns, but it's about the relationship between these women. And actually Geeta, she's told to a third person point of view, so there's a bit of distance which allows us to show a little bit more of what's going on. But we discover actually her point of view and her take on the events up until the start of the novel aren't always as reliable as we think they are. And so she gets a new understanding of herself amongst these other women and the way they bond together over these goals. But there is some sort of quick fire dialogue in there that just really made me laugh. Really funny book, and great characters. And yeah, I found it really enjoyable, and one that I would definitely recommend. And actually, I'm quite sad now they didn't make to the final 6 for the women's prize, but I'm looking forward to. We've not got long to find out who's actually won that prize, so I'm really looking forward to that. So the next book I read was a collection of short stories, and I picked this up because I'd read the previous book by the author, Agustina Bazterrica. I'm sorry, probably pronouncing that horribly wrong. But I read her previous book, which was Tender in the Flesh, which is a book all about um, a society, dystopian society, where we start eating people. People is meat, basically. And I really enjoyed that novel. It wasn't perfect. There were things about it that really frustrated me, but it made me want to read more of her work. And I'm glad I did. This is 19 Claws and a Blackbird. This has literally not come out very long ago at all. And it's a collection of short stories that I think need to be applauded really for their ambition as much as anything. If you're looking for, I mean, the sort of sold as sort of horror, but if you're looking for something to snuggle up with on an autumn night, these probably aren't the stories you're going to want to read. But if you want something that's a bit subversive, a bit challenging, then this is one you might want to pick up. It's translated by Sarah Moses as well, just wanted to mention that as well. So it's sort of like 2 people involved in the novel. But I read the information here. In the tense, macabre stories, bodies fall from the sky, perfect nails conceal grisly secrets, and violence pulses behind gleaming facades. And I would say some of these books work better than others. Often stories work better than others. Often you find with collections of short stories, there are some that sort of really shine through beyond the others. And there was a couple that I sort of skimmed through because I didn't get as much out of them. The first book, story, which is the one about the body falling from the sky, I really enjoyed, and there are others in there, and I think there are some that are really going to stick with me actually. So for example, there's a story about a woman who decides that the circle is the perfect shape, and she aspires to be a circle. So she goes through, well, I won't go into it too much, but it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim. So I enjoyed this. It's not my favourite collection of short stories. I prefer Tender is the Flesh, but it's really ambitious, and she's got her own voice. She's sort of, her language sort of, she talks in circles a lot of the time, which I found really interesting. So if you're interested in something that's a little different, I've never read anything like it, that feels really modern, it feels really contemporary, it feels like it's quite challenging really, it's not a traditional collection of short stories, then this might be one that you'll enjoy. And as I say, she's really playful with language. What really actually struck me from this is quite a few of the short stories are told in second person point of view, which is really challenging to do, but I really love the impact of that. And it's quite unusual to find that in a collection of short stories, or anywhere really. It's probably the least popular point of view to use, but it can be really effective because it draws the reader in so well. So yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely give it a go if you enjoy Tender is the Flesh, but don't expect it to be the same. It's quite different, but quite accomplished, quite challenging, and I would say quite a sort of fresh take on the horror short story. Not my favourite read. It wasn't necessarily for me, all of them, but there were stories in there that I think, as I say, are gonna live with me for a while, for the best or the or not, I'm not sure. The next book I read is one that I really, really loved, and I think we're going to hear quite a lot about this one as the year goes on, and that's The Memory of Animals by Claire Fuller. And as you can see, I'm very lucky here to have a signed edition. I do love the odd signed edition, and I think this was more by chance than anything, but this particular one was. But I have a feeling that this is a book that we're going to hear quite a lot about in the coming months. The author Claire Fuller is a Costa Book Prize winner. She's won prizes, I think, for every book that she's brought out. So I think, as I say, we're going to hear quite a bit about it. And it won't surprise you when I say I enjoyed this, that this is a book that has a lot of themes in there that are kind of familiar to the sort of stuff I like to read. It's a dystopian novel. It's a pandemic novel. Apparently she wrote this before COVID, which feels really difficult to believe now, but I think that's amazing. You know, she must have just blown her mind when the whole COVID thing blew up. But in the novel, we have a character called Neffy. It's a first person point of view, and Neffy, we start off, she has signed up for some trials to try this vaccine for this new pandemic that's hit the country, hit the world. And as she's in hospital and she's taking this vaccine, and then they give her the actual disease that they call dropsy, she falls really ill. But while she's really ill, the poop really hits the fan, every shade, every kind of fan, and the trial sort of grinds to a halt when everybody leaves the hospital. And there's a new variant of this disease that's come out that has just basically wiped people out. So we end up with her and three other characters living in this hospital ward, hiding from gangs of people who they've seen through the windows. It turns out, I don't want to give too much away of this, but it's basically about what they do from that point. And I just really, really love this. It's one of those books I could not put down. I really enjoyed it. And as alongside this sort of narrative of this dystopian life that Neffy's living with these other young people in this hospital ward, there is a way that they introduce that she can bring in her backstory as well. And so we're also seeing the events that led up to this moment. And there's another layer on top of that, but really accessible. Could not put it down. Really enjoyed it. If you like dystopian fiction generally, definitely give it a go. If you've read anything by Claire Fuller before, give it a go. But if you think that sounds of interest, try it. It just really gave me sort of the contemporary Day of the Triffid vibes, but also, as well as really linking into that that dystopian genre, and bringing in a lot of the kind of ideas that we often see with dystopian genre. It felt really fresh and new as well. So really, really enjoyed that. 5-star, The Memory of Animals by Claire Fuller. So that's just come out as well, and one that I would really, really recommend. And the final book that I read in May, and as I say, I'll add the link in the description to the books in my first video as well, so you can have a look through those. But the last one I read is one that I've got quite excited about, which is Julia Bartz, The Writing Retreat. I love books and about writers. It is no surprise that I picked this one up. It's sort of a gothic kind of story. We have our main character called Alex, or Al, who ends up at this writing retreat, winning a place on this writing retreat where there are 4 other writers, and they're competing to have their novels published. And there's lots that I really like about this. It has this gorgeous gothic landscape. They're all in this sort of Victorian mansion. It has lots of stuff about the craft of writing and about the experience of writing that I really enjoyed. I'm not sure how much I was able to identify with it. A lot of it felt kind of like the idea of the lifestyle of a writer, rather than what it's actually to be a writer, which is ironic because it's written by a writer. But the fact that these people write down and they write pages every day, and they don't need to edit anything or redraft it, and book launches are all champagne and full of people partying. There was things about it that I found it difficult to sort of link in with my experience of the publishing world, but maybe it's just my experience of the publishing world, I don't know. I live in hope. But it turns into this fantastic thriller. There's some saucy stuff in there as well. I really kept turning the pages on this. So basically they'll find themselves in this Victorian villa with this really controversial, well-known writer, Rosa Vallow. And there's something about that that reminded me of The 13th Tale as well, by Diane Setterfield. I don't know why it's not the same at all, but there's something about the setup. And they're all sort of competing to impress her. But then one of the girls goes missing, and it all sort of goes to pot after that. But I could not stop reading it. Is it the most sophisticated and literary novel I've ever written? No. Was it a fantastic little light-hearted page-turner that you had to maybe take a bit of a leap of faith in? Yes, but I really enjoyed it. I read it in 24 hours, which says a lot, really. And sometimes you just want a book that you can sink into and just consume, and that is the book that I would recommend if you're looking for sort of a light read. I mean, the subject matter is not necessarily light. It is sort of a horror gothic kind of a novel, but if you want a page turner, then that's the one for you. So those are my books. So my calculation, I've read 14 books this month, which isn't too bad at all. I need to do some totting up to work out how much I've read so far this year. For those of you who are new to the channel, you might not know, basically the reason that the whole channel came about was I set myself a challenge to read 100 books in 2023, which I am kicking the butt of. I'm definitely going to do, and I might have to put the number up a little bit more. So that's what I'm doing here, but I'm also including reviews of books that I already have. I've come clean and said I have a problem. I have a book buying problem, and just to underline that, I have another book haul video coming up in the next week or so. Oh my god, my husband is going to leave me. But I also do reviews of books that I've read that I still own, you know, 6 on the shelf books as well. So if you're interested in reviews, in potentially finding out some new reads, then it's lovely to have you along. And as usual, it's great to hear what your thoughts are, what books you enjoy. I've had some fantastic recommendations as well already from subscribers. So like, I need more encouragement in buying new books. It's a problem, but it could be worse. It could be worse. It could be a worse problem than it is. But thank you all so much for coming along and watching this video, and I'll see you again later in the week. Take care. Bye.